Hello, hello, hello. It's Susie Walker here from Psychologies magazine, and I'm joined on the sofa by the wonderful Psychologies columnist and nutritional advisor and author, Eve Kalinik. Eve has written a fabulous new book called Happy Gut, Happy Mind, and it is number 160 in the Amazon bestseller list.
Well, it was. It had gone a bit quite high up into something 130 on Amazon. It's slightly tailed off now, but that was quite incredible. Yeah. So it's had a really positive response, which has been wonderful to see. Yeah, very happy.
I mean, obviously, we're massive fans of your work, and me personally, I'm a massive fan of your work. You've worked with me and helped me heal my gut and made me feel a lot better about my life. But for people who are just coming to this conversation about the gut for the first time, tell us a little bit about when we say happy gut, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so the premise of the second book, because my first book was, I guess, more of an overview around gut health and the sort of areas that our gut kind of helps to manage, and this one was much more focused on the gut-brain connection, because that's where a lot of the research and science is actually gaining a huge amount of momentum and traction. So the book was really to delve into that area of gut health and basically give the reader a bit more knowledge around why it's so important to support the health of your gut when you're thinking about supporting a happy mind. And so that's where the sort of happy gut came from, because it is very much a bi-directional relationship. So a lot of us are quite familiar with that. We feel anxious in our mind, and then we feel the kind of butterflies in our tummy, and we feel that unrest in our gut. But maybe a lot of people are not so much aware of the fact that our guts, the trillions of microbes that live in our guts, chat back to our brain. So they communicate in various ways back to our brain, including producing a lot of those happy neurotransmitters. So that was kind of the premise of the happy gut in the title.
So talk us through that. So talk about where do we, if we want to kind of get that conversation going between our brain and our gut, how do we start that conversation? How do we make sure that the communication lines are open?
Yeah. So, obviously everybody's coming to their gut health journey at different points. So obviously if there's a lot of symptoms and things like that, then they should, it's better to work with a practitioner that can identify where maybe the communication lines have faltered a little bit. But on a very basic level, by helping to support the health of the microbiome and the health of the gut, you're essentially maximizing those communication channels. So I think the thing around gut health is as well that in the last kind of, let's say, 10 years, there's been a huge amount of products out there which are all kind of great, and things like sauerkraut and kombuchas, and which were sort of seen as a bit weird and a bit niche, but obviously are now in pretty much all the major supermarkets. But you don't have to get so kind of faddy with things. Actually, even live yogurts and traditional cheese they're still fermented foods. But I think that for a lot of people, they maybe have a misconception that to help to sort of start working on their gut, they've got to do really extreme things, or certainly cutting out a lot of things, when actually it's really the opposite. It's actually more about what can we add in, what can we bring into our diet that's going to help to nourish all of those trillions of microbes in our gut, and everything that they do to help support that brain connection. So really basically adding in some of the foods that are gonna do that. So that would be the cliche is eat the rainbow. But when we do that, what we're doing is having a broad range of sources of fibre in our diet. And as we currently know, the more diverse and heterogeneous our microbiome, the healthier and the stronger it is. And so the easiest way to achieve that is taking in different types of fibre, because we have different flavour preferences, so do the microbes in our gut. So if we're taking in lots of different fibre, we're essentially feeding lots of different microbes in our gut. So it does sound a bit, like I said, a bit cliche to eat the rainbow, but it's a good kind of thing to have in mind. And for some people, you know, a lot of us, we do riff around the same foods. So even if we're getting enough quantity in terms of fibre, because that's also another element of it, you need to get enough of it. But we might just rotate around the same foods. So getting a bit like of diversity in that will help. And even simple things, and I think we've all kind of got a newfound love for our store cupboard with the last 6 months and using some of those ingredients in there that maybe was stashed at the back of the cupboard. But, you know, even if you're, say, somebody, like a lot of clients, is particularly going into winter now, we might like a nice, you know, oatmeal porridge or something. So if we have different sorts of grains in our cupboard, so let's just say we might mix and match that with some spelt flakes or some quinoa or buckwheat flakes or something like that, that you're then getting that natural rotation without having to really like think a lot about getting those diversity. And equally, I sort of encourage clients to make up nice sort of nut and seed mixes, because again, then you can just sprinkle that on and you're getting a lot of different types of fibre in that one hit. So even simple things like that can bring in some diversity. So yeah, on a very basic level, like getting diversity of fibre, eating the rainbow is a really important part of helping to support that gut-brain connection.
Sure. And are there quick fixes? Are there anything? So you've always taught me, and you've always taught our readers to, you know, it's about our diet and changes. But are there any things that we can help quickly if we're getting lots of bloating?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to really think about what's creating the bloating in the first place. And I'd love to say that there is this one gut health panacea that you can silver bullet. But unfortunately, it's very much an individualistic thing. So each and every one of our gut microbiome is entirely unique. So it's a bit like a fingerprint. It's that unique from one of us. So what's going to work? So somebody might rave about one thing that's worked for their gut health. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good for you. So I would say, like, think about what I just talked about in terms of eating the rainbow, because even just doing some of that stuff can help if you're somebody that's just not getting enough rotation or not getting enough fibre in the diet. But, you know, if there's some symptoms, you know, there are kind of obviously things like probiotics that you can take. But I always think that trying to do quick fixes doesn't ultimately resolve the underlying issue. So, and I really talk about, you know, sort of celebrating the sort of mini gains, really, because it's all about consistency. And if you try and add in loads, try and chuck too much at something in one go, you can't really see what isn't working. So it is a bit of a, you know, more about, like I said, the small gains that add up more consistently, rather than doing something quite extreme for a short period of time and then going back to old habits. But even things like you say, bloating and you know, gut symptoms like sexy things like excessive gas and all of that stuff. But a lot of that's not necessarily coming from the gut necessarily. So it comes back to that gut-brain connection. So for a lot of people, a trigger for their symptom is stress. So anything you can do. So again, this seems like people just go, oh, I've done that mindfulness a couple of days and it doesn't really work for me, right? So, and you know this and you're laughing because it is about building new neural connections. It's a cumulative process. It's a bit like you don't go and do one gym session and then come out with ripped biceps. You know, it's the same concept with your mind. So you've got to think about that as well as building that into as part of as helping to support and nourish your gut, is doing some kind of daily mindfulness. I call it bubble wrapping the mind in the book. So, you know, deep belly breathing. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mindful, you know, the meditation apps. I mean, I know a lot of people really like them, but I know for a lot of people that have got busy minds, let's just say that, they find it incredibly stressful to sit and meditate. So breathing exercises are a good sort of, you know, starting point, because it gives you something to focus on. And deep belly breathing, which is intrinsic to things like yoga as a practice, you know, that's helping to basically, working with that diaphragmatic breath, it helps to soothe the vagus nerve that joins the gut and the brain. So, you know, that in itself can be a trigger for bloating and things like that. And particularly with the, you know, the current situation in the world, so there's, you know, stress is obviously heightened. And as a result, I think a lot of people are then experiencing more gut symptoms because of that.
Sure. I mean, absolutely what you're saying about practices to calm the mind. What are the things that we should be doing?
Well, I think there's some really basic things that can, let's just say, stress the gut. So one of the most basic and simple things to do is sitting down and chewing our food, which sounds, again, like a really boring basic thing, but a lot of us don't really do that. And you can create symptoms of bloating and gas irrespective of what you're eating if you're just literally inhaling it. So even things like taking time over our meals helps us to better tune in with some of those hunger, the satiety cues, because a lot of us will like eat a meal rapidly and then within 5 minutes be like, oh, I need some sugar, I need some chocolate, I need this, that and the other, when actually we haven't really allowed some of those hormones to properly kick in. And also by doing that, what you are doing is creating pockets of recovery in your day. So which comes back down to that, what we're talking about, mindfulness, you know, putting your devices in a drawer when you're eating your food, because a lot of us might have not just one but multiple devices on the go and then eating and then checking emails and not even really looking at our food. And you know, you can't be in that rest and digest, which is optimum functioning for the gut, if you're in that fight and flight. So I'd say, you know, try not to rush through meals because that can impact on that. So that would probably be one of my key points there. I mean, again, it comes back down to what I would say is try not to put labels and stigmas around foods as well, because I think a lot of us, again, I think that's part of the insidious diet culture, and I'm sure there's a whole thing we could talk about on that, but that's not my area really. But you know, I think that there's been this trend to cut things out or skip meals, whether it's wrapped up in a fasting thing or whatever. But you know, this tendency to kind of either label foods or food groups as bad or you know, in a negative way. And I think that also breeds it breeds a lot of stress and anxiety around our food and what we're eating, which then again impacts on the gut. So ironically, you're taking out the foods that you think are going to help support it, but because you're so stressed and anxious about what you can and can't eat, you're actually impinging on that, on your gut to kind of function optimally. So I'd say, you know, try not to put stigmas around any foods at all.
That's refreshing advice.
Yeah, you can almost see people, and also I think once you say to yourself, actually, you know what, I mean, look, allergies aside, because obviously that's a completely different thing, and you definitely need to avoid foods if you've got an allergy to them. But this perceived intolerances, which sometimes people just often self-diagnose, see that a lot in clinic. Try not to do that, you know, because the chances are that you probably don't have an issue. It might be the load, it might be the types of foods you're eating, and why it's important to talk with somebody that's professional that can help you with that, because it's very hard, I think, for us to work on ourselves when we're in ourselves as well. We can't really look at ourselves objectively or even look at what we're eating and things like that. So you can save money longer term by working with a professional that can sort of help you through that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, with time, what's the best way we can support our immune system?
What's the what, sorry?
Best way we can support our immune system.
Best way we can support our immune system. Sorry, it was crackling there. So, yeah, I mean, obviously this has been a big topic of conversation because of everything, you know, that we're going through at the moment. But actually, I think a lot of people are really surprised to know that 70 to 80% of your immune system is located in your gut, and it fundamentally relies on the health of all of those trillions of microbes in your gut. So everything that I just mentioned before about, you know, eating the rainbow, getting lots of colour in your diet, does bring in fibre. It also brings in lots of polyphenols, which are special plant chemicals, which helps to support our immune system as well. You know, adding in some fermented foods, because I mean, there are some really great probiotic supplements on the market, well, one in particular, but there are also a lot of ones that, you know, we don't necessarily know if they're doing anything or not, but you can get sources of the beneficial bacteria that support our gut through fermented foods. And like I say, you can obviously go down the realms of, I think a lot of people have cottoned onto the sourdough baking trend over the lockdown period. But you know, things like I grew up in a Polish household, so my dad used to make sauerkraut for us as kids, and I think that honestly like helped my immune system massively. But you know, that's very simple. That's literally just cabbage and a bit of salt. And so, you know, some of those expensive sauerkraut you see in the supermarket for like, you know, 7-8 quid a jar is quite amazing, really, about how they can charge that for literally cabbage and salt. So, you know, you can make a couple of your own ferments, but like really, really basically, like just yogurt, live yogurt. Make sure it says live cultures on it and it's natural. Will provide, again, another source of fermented food, and cheese, things like, you know, your generic cheddars and good old manchegos and things like that. So, you know, getting blue cheese particularly, so adding those in can just help bring in some source of those beneficial bacteria, which then again sort of helps to boost the overall health of the microbiome. But you know, a lot of our immune system, sometimes our immune system can be put under more strain because of stress. Again, that comes back down to supporting the mind, because cortisol and those stress hormones will win over every other hormone and system in the body. It is our survival mechanism. It is there to kick in to say run away. It's certainly not worried about viruses and bacteria and stuff if it's having to just literally run away from a predator. So yeah, everything you can do to help manage your stress is definitely going to be a big part of helping to support your immune system.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
So nice to chat to you.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah, let's get together soon.
Yes, lots of love.
Lots of love.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.